all of whom are living this crisis and this particular challenge in real time. And this session really is to hear from them, both in terms of what's working, what has been the biggest hurdle to overcome, and many other questions that have come in on the chat. So perhaps I can start by asking each, and starting with you, Tammy, to really give us your first sense of what's been your biggest challenge and how have you overcome that challenge. Then we'll work through Ralph, Lawrence, and Daphne.
Well, thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting us. Right now I'm working for a department that's really in the hot seat because we are making a lot of purchases that we haven't made in the past. But as CIO, my biggest challenge has been twofold. One is I don't have enough tools. I don't have enough access to be able to give all of my employees the capability of working from home. I only have a little bit more than half. So I have about 10,000 licenses for 17,000 employees. So my challenge in the last 2 weeks is making sure that I keep the network free for those people who are working on critical services in our organization. So really that's one of my biggest challenges in trying to work around that. And we have resorted to looking at work sessions during the day to enable the bulk of our workforce, while a small portion who are working on critical services are getting access all day. The second challenge we're having is we don't have enough tools really for the remote workforce. And a lot of the tools aren't secure enough yet for the type of work that we're doing. So my challenge is they're clamoring for having these things in place today, and they're just not there yet. And so it's how are we going to meet that demand in the coming days, and how do we really understand what's critical and what's not, and what can be done using the tools that are out there now.
Very interesting. Thank you, Tammy. Ralph, from your chair at Canadian Blood.
Well, thank you again for the opportunity to participate today. And I would say from our perspective, again, we run the blood system across Canada, everywhere except Quebec. And our challenge is we need to keep collecting blood and processing so that we can deliver those products to hospitals. And so our operation just continues, our collection events continue, and it's making sure that the applications and services that we deliver stay up for all those events, because they all are technology enabled. Also, it's ensuring that everybody is able to get connected. We've actually got a fairly robust infrastructure, so that I'm surprised and amazed at how good we are at actually working remotely. So that's actually something that's been working. And then we get the odd shocks here and there. Like 2 weeks ago, the Prime Minister, in his noontime address, said, please go out and donate blood. And he quoted both Canadian Blood Services and Héma-Québec. And he promptly crashed our server, or all the donors crashed our server. And so we scrambled to get it back up and running. And that was just a matter of minutes. But it was also ensuring that now we've got enough capacity to get, like, these surges in appointments. And ironically, this past week, CTV News or CBC, one of those, again, had a little vignette on blood donation, and we actually saw our highest ever concurrent usage for people making appointments. So I have to say, I applaud Canadians for the big hearts, because they really are listening, but we've got to make sure all this keeps running.
Excellent. Thank you. Lawrence, from your chair in Toronto.
Yes, hello, and thank you to everybody who's joined, and thank you to the CIO Strategy Council for putting this together. As a municipality, and certainly the largest in Canada, our challenge in terms of has been in terms of working very close on the ground. So our essential services, those that are in Toronto paramedic, our fire, our medical group, and then we are critical services. So when over the past 2 weeks, as the situation got a lot more became a lot more dangerous and a lot more concerning, the organization on March the 18th said to the majority of the workforce to go home. So stability was something that was very crucial in terms of ensuring that all of a sudden we had thousands of people who literally left So stability was very important. And we, at a bad snow day, we were able to support 1,000, just to give some numbers, 1,000 teleworkers. In the past few weeks, we have ramped up to a stage that will eventually get to about 6,000 and eventually about 10,000 in the next few weeks. So maintaining that level of pace on the infrastructure to keep ramping up in a very critical time was a big challenge, and it certainly couldn't have occurred with a very strong, dedicated technical team. That's been really very important. I found that my role, having a fairly strong technical background, has helped some very quick decisions in terms of the team. Another challenge has been also, is while we're trying to ramp up and support essentially almost 30,000 workforce, 2.9 million people, has been the safety of my staff. I have approximately 800 staff, and it's really tracking the safety. How are they doing? Where are they? And also the number of reporting. We've had to report quite a lot to track our people and make our people feel safe. And in terms of being distance and disengagement, and trying to keep them whole, while we have some staff that are physically on the ground, building operational centers, dismantling operation centers. And the biggest challenge right now is not so much on the stability and scale. I feel that we're very solid there. It's now solutions that are being asked to be deployed very quickly in a matter of days. We built a whole new application in 4 days to help Toronto Public Health. So it's been an unprecedented time in just pace, but on the positive side, I think that we're going to come out with a very different looking city of Toronto, and definitely very different looking digital government.
Absolutely. Very interesting. Thank you. Daphne, from your perspective at the province.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Had to unmute myself. Thank you again for having me. And maybe just to be clear, I represent enterprise IT within the government of Ontario. So I'm the corporate CIO, but we've got 8 amazing CIOs, Chief Information Cyber Security Officer, and an enterprise CIO, all working collectively together. Hard to get here, but I'm glad that I'm here. And I think it's important as a community to share and learn from each other. So maybe first I'll start with saying that my predecessors, I don't take any credit for this, got us on Office 365. We migrated over 65,000 employees over the last 2 years to Office 365 in the cloud. And thank God, because we are all able to work in a mobile manner using Office 365. And of course, for some employees, what that means is that whether they are adjusting to laptops or ordering laptops, a lot of them are able to work using devices that they can get themselves as well if they need to just check what's going on. So we're really proud of that. It's been a lifesaver. We're all connected online and able to really be productive and do the work that we need to do. And that's huge kudos to the enterprise IT infrastructure organization in Ontario. With respect to the biggest challenges right now, to be frank, it's the supply chain. What we are doing from an IT perspective, like many of my colleagues have described, is we are moving so incredibly fast to support the business needs of the government. This is a difficult time for everybody globally, and the information that we're trying to collect and the agility that we're trying to really display is difficult. It's tiring. I think many of you probably feel like that. I was going to say that's one of our challenges around making sure that the technology allows for the right end-to-end view of supply chain, and that's something that we know many of you are depending on Ontario to do, and we're working closely, of course, with municipalities and others as well. I would say the cross-government coordination, when the issues of this urgency come about, it's all hands on deck and we're all very focused, but at the same time, we're really stretching ourselves to work across ministries, and we're learning new ways of getting together, of connecting at a speed that we've never done before. And while that's difficult, it's exciting. To Lawrence's point, I think this is changing the way that we will work together. We're quite excited about that. But the other challenge, maybe the last one that I'll mention, is of course the mental health. Literally, like many of you, our days start really early, our nights end late, and doing that for 24/7 for many days in a row. And certainly, I think you'll appreciate with me, because many of our staff as CIOs are the ones that are working at night and on the weekends to make sure that anything during the day is up and running and operating. So I'm really concerned about their health, their ability to balance their workload, and many of them have families at home or are sharing a workspace with spouses or partners. Those are probably the biggest challenges.
Daphne, just picking up on your point around the cross-government collaboration, it strikes me that many organizations are pleasantly surprised with how that is working. It does occur, though, that there are security and privacy concerns. Can you unpack for us how you're dealing with those issues?
Yeah, I mean, to be quite frank, well, I would say on the security side, and making sure that our systems are protected, particularly around the increased cybersecurity threats, we've increased our alertness. We're doing the same things we did before, and we've got the right tools in place. Ontario in the last 2 to 3 years has invested, I think, in a healthy way in cybersecurity. And so I have to say that while that's something we watch very carefully every day, and we're increasing our awareness campaigns for staff, we feel like that's been in good hand. With respect to privacy, I think many of us are kind of astounded at the speed at which we're making decisions and working with our political colleagues to ensure that we're able to quickly assess the appropriateness of what we're doing. We're making decisions quickly. Rules are being looked at from a different perspective. But to be frank, I think this is where the public service plays a terrific role of making sure that there's a good balance in place. And I have to say, it's amazing what we can do when we have to with respect to balancing the needs of agility and speed for the particular situation we are in with respect to a crisis, with respect for the people of Ontario in terms of privacy.
That's very helpful. Thank you. And Ralph, maybe you can help us on this next question, which you spoke of, the surprised uptick after some media commentating and shout out to be on the donors list. How do you envisage business continuity? Will you be able to withstand this amount of increased traffic? And how are you managing that through that?
Oh, that's a really good question, Elizabeth. I think a big part of it is just one, keeping a close eye on the way everything is operating. So in other words, do we have how many people are connecting, and how many, what's our appointment volume, so on. So it's really looking at the measures and the metrics and ensuring that we've got enough headroom to be able to withstand like a surge in appointments, for example. Like I said, 2 weeks ago, the Prime Minister's announcements just basically brought our servers down. But the steps that we took and immediately kind of expanded the capacity really did help us. Now, I think we're lucky in that we're largely virtualized, so it wasn't a matter of going out and procuring more hardware, but really just increasing the number, like the virtual memory, the virtual servers, and so on, and just expanding that so we're able to accommodate that. I think the other part is for last few years, we've actually put a strong focus on business continuity. And because many of our applications are mission critical, we want to make sure that if something happens here, that we're able to recover fairly quickly. And so we've got those processes and procedures and infrastructure in place to be able to accommodate all that, and along a wide range, everything from servers that run the business to how people connect into the corporate network.
Right. Thank you. Tammy, maybe you can speak for a minute to this next question, which is off of the point that Daphne was making around cross-collaboration. You mentioned not enough site licenses for PSPC, but how you're dealing with a number of cross-departments on your procurement what we call express procurement these days. And how are you managing that? Tammy, I don't think I think your microphone's on.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Thanks.
So one of the things that my colleague said was, it really is amazing what government can do when we need to. And like she said, the rules are there in normal times in order to protect us. And now as we're doing our work quickly, we are looking at those rules and making sure they apply in this particular instance, because, you know, we need to be, like when we talk about procurement, we need to procure now. And so we need to make sure that we're moving. And that's one thing that government can do. It understands the rules that are there and the frameworks that are there and why they're there. And we have a good understanding of how to leverage them and shift them when we need to deal with a crisis. One of the biggest challenges I'm having is not so much, it's not so much in just having the capacity, but it's in people really understanding what business continuity planning means. One of my biggest challenges really has been that I have one, but the business continuity plan was me. And so,
wow.
Not in all cases, but in some cases. And so my question is, I know I'm going to go and fix the system, but while I'm fixing it, what are you doing? And I think that's where in some cases there's a lot of pressure, and I would suspect that a lot of my CIO colleagues on this call are feeling the same thing, where, you know, prioritization now has to be key because everything is urgent. And yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of pressure on us being able to find the solutions. And we have to be careful, because when solutions go in too quickly, we end up breaking things. And we discovered that early this week. We put a change in actually to, because the way it works is a lot of our processes are based on coming on to the work location in order to plug into the major LAN connection that we have for all of our employees, in order to get things like passwords restated or to get set up. So we're not on Office 365 yet, where you can buy a device and it comes to your home and you can set yourself up. So that is proving to be our biggest challenge. We are not set up for a full workforce and to offer IT support to that workforce in a remote way. And so when you come in, if we had made a mistake on the infrastructure, we would fix it. And as soon as you plugged into the board, it would be okay. So we actually faced a problem. We put in a change to enable passwords to stop resetting, because you have to be on site to do it. And in doing so, we broke something else and some people lost their access. And getting them back on has been a big challenge. We spent 2 days getting about 200 people back to recover their connectivity. And we have to do that on the phone with them at home. So I would say the big lesson learned is that our changes are not as recoverable as they used to be. And we need to spend more time testing. Even though there's a lot of pressure to do it quickly, if you can, you know, manage to take a breath and look at it a second time or get a fresh pair of eyes on it, it's worth it.
Right. Thank you. And Lawrence, from your chair, you mentioned how resilient and frankly didn't miss a beat from many of the employees and for the public. Do you think, you mentioned at the beginning that this is transformational for the city. How do you see this affecting your planning going forward if you envisage more telework and broader digital connections from citizens?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think it fundamentally speaks to the fact that it's about culture. And what we've demonstrated is the fact is that we can stand this up in a crisis or a pandemic. So it speaks to a DNA of a culture. For example, we're going to be launching very soon a chat box to respond to COVID-19. And similar to my colleagues, the cross collaboration is now in a matter of days. So I think it speaks to culture, and also it speaks to a DNA. Another thing it's spoken to me is about, it's not so much hierarchy, which, you know, in big organizations, it's really about the knowledge and the skill sets in creating. So in what I've done is that I've created a group that are not based on necessarily the titles or where the hierarchy. It's really about a nerve center that speaks to what is the brain, or what is the intelligence, or what is the skill sets we need at this problem right now. So at 11 a.m., we have a group called the Divisional Operational Center. We meet, it's a cross-section of groups, and people come in and leave. And it's really about what is the problem we're trying to solve, and what is the best skills. And some people are more traditional, so they're focusing on keeping the stability, keeping the lights on. And some people are bringing some real ideas that, 3 weeks ago would have been frowned upon. But they're so much welcomed now to say, let's try it. And how do we do it in a way that's balanced, but at the same token? And what I've found is that it's got me to learn about my leaders. It's got me to learn about staff. And what we're doing, my program manager, every week we do a shout out where she constructs an email, and we just congratulate the service desk. We congratulate the enterprise architectural group. We just keep their spirits up. So I think for digital government, it has essentially flattened the curve without sort of taking that analogy. I think we're going to be a lot more leaner in terms of our ability to run hard.
Right.
But also, finally, I think what it's done is that, and maybe this will come in a later question, I've been at the city 2.5 years. The relationships have been really important, because what the relationships have done is that in a time of pace, in a time of could be misunderstanding, I'm literally on calls with colleagues and walking with colleagues that I may have not walked on a daily basis, just saying, how do we get this done? And what you interpret or what you proceed is based on, we're all in this together. So I think the cultural aspect is what's going to drive digital and really fundamentally transform it at a pace that has never been seen before, in my opinion.
Right, very helpful. Thank you. Daphne, perhaps to you, you mentioned supply chain as well. Can you talk about the external supply chain that you've had to deal with? Have you had to talk to vendors and suppliers and get in the queue faster than might otherwise have happened?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say we've done a couple of things. Firstly, probably like everybody, our vendor partners in the telecommunications space have been phenomenal. I mean, huge shout out to them. Who would have thought that, yes, we've had busy signals, yes, we've had some dropped calls here and there, but at the end of the day, considering the capacity that's been increased, in Ontario overall for all of us to enable us to do business remotely has been astounding. In working with some of our vendor partners, they were able to respond really quickly to increasing capacity, for example, for our telehealth line. And they've been incredibly responsive. So, thank you to all of you, to many of you. The other piece of it is we know who our vendors are with respect to dependencies. We've done a supply chain analysis where we've kind of gone through each one and understood what's going on and what are we dependent on. And then we've made some phone calls to make sure that there's a level of stability and confidence in the system. And now we're looking at mitigation plans. How long will this last? What does it mean for us today, in 2-3 months, in 6 months? And do we have the right depth in terms of choices to be made around our own supply chain internally for really infrastructure, let's say, is the focus right now.
Right, so hugely important for government. Ralph, do you have a perspective on external vendors and suppliers that you've had to work with during this period?
Yes, and I guess there's really two perspectives on our supply chain. One obviously is the technology vendors, and we've actually been fairly lucky in that area in that we just did a refresh of our data centers. That's only about 1 year old, so we're not really in rough shape, even though we've seen some some issues in terms of not getting deliveries on time over the last month or so. What's interesting, though, is our suppliers that we use in our blood manufacturing, and ensuring that the consumables that we use in our collection events and really throughout our supply chain, we're still able to get. And so far, we haven't had any problems, even though we've been reaching out to those suppliers. But one of the things one of my analytics group has done is actually tried to map suppliers on a global basis, on an international basis, against the COVID-19 hotspots, and understanding where there might be some future risks. And we're working with our supply chain organization, with our procurement, to really identify where are those risks and where should we be talking to suppliers on a more frequent basis to ensure that we get what we need in order to keep our business running.
Interesting. Speaking of data, and maybe Tammy, you've got a perspective on this. I can only imagine there is going to be a huge requirement for KPIs of both how resilient the network has been, what you've been able to accomplish. Maybe you can speak to how you're collecting data at the same time as managing this crisis.
And that's one of the big challenges of our time, is how much time do we spend on collecting data and how much time do we spend on actually doing the fixes. So we're actually managing expectations around that. The biggest KPIs actually that I'm being asked for right now, because I think from a technology perspective, how we've set ourselves up to respond is we've actually set up a BBM across all of my technical specialists, and I'm talking to them on a regular basis, and we're kind of going back and forth. We're using BBM. I know it sounds simple enough, but we all know it's happening all the time, and we all have a backup. And so what we're finding is that we're now documenting it by osmosis, almost, like as we're doing the work and as it's coming out. So we actually have a small group of people that are looking through that trail now and trying to document how we can improve our response and to get the statistics that we need to demonstrate that. I think the area for us, though, that's going to be the biggest challenge is in the business of procurement. We are actually working very hard at getting statistics on what we've purchased in medical equipment. We've had the supply chain that we're dealing with, of course, is for PPE right now, the medical equipment that's required. And we've had phenomenal support, but now it's how do we track all of the data of the equipment we're receiving and how we're distributing it to other government departments and our provincial and municipal partners. That is going to be our biggest challenge going forward, because there is a lot of purchasing happening at the moment.
Right. Lawrence, from your perspective on the data side and tracking? Sorry, Lawrence, I don't think we can hear you.
Yes, sorry about that. Yes,
That's okay.
very much so. We've had a lot of requests from Toronto Public Health in terms of how we are utilizing data. We have a very strong open data. The city has an open data master plan and an open data portal where we've sort of published various data that has gone through various privacy approvals. But what has been really interesting is that we have a team called the geospatial team, and they have been called upon to really use the data analytical skills to be able to build modeling and build various different areas of how are we tracking data to make and help the Toronto Public Health make good decisions. So that's been incredible to watch in terms of how data has really tried to fuel that ability and to be able to help our emergency operations center who are at the front lines trying to make a difference. So the data piece has been very crucial. It seems to be a team that has been sort of more in the background, but they're very much up front right now.
Well, indeed, it's the issue that so much of the public is interested in as well. And there's this cadence of providing it, which of course is, and particularly from public health, there's an ethical responsibility as well as an informational responsibility. Have you been challenged by that, Lawrence, throughout?
I've been challenged on certain conversations based on the ability to also have, ensure that we are still following our ethical principles as public servants. And in December, I was part of an initiative in terms of looking at about connected communities and how we're engaging the public. So it's very important that even during this crisis, we are public servants. We have a fiduciary responsibility to protect the public, and we are certainly not compromising that when it comes to data. We're using it in a way that's already been pre-approved. We're just accelerating the ability to use those data sets that have already gone through a very internal, rigorous process. We're just now expanding their capabilities much more in terms of utilization that was probably used before. So I really want to be stressed that it's not changing those principles. It's really expanding the ability to have more insights internally that allow the decisions to be made. So that's very, very important.
And Daphne, from your perspective, we've all seen that this looks like it's not going to go away tomorrow. A number of weeks will be challenged, and particularly for public institutions, this challenge isn't going to go away in 3 months. There'll be many, many hangovers. Wondering about how you are going to keep up, both for your teleworkers and for the government services at this level of service.
Yeah, well, I think that's the biggest opportunity we have. I mean, that's actually what excites me. Apart from, being in crisis mode, there is a silver lining. For many of us, our adoption curve of technology has just spiked hugely. The demand for technology solutions is enormous. And if, I believe many of us on this phone call are already turning our minds to 100% remote workforce, ability to be remote one day and be back at work another day. I think one of the scenarios we have to think about is how quickly can we turn that switch on and off. That's the reality of, I think, the new world order in the sense of this kind of threat to our public health. And of course, the other opportunity is what we call supercharging digitization, and the turbo boost we could get out of really working together with our ministries, observing the way that we deliver services, and realizing that at the end of the day, we have to reverse our model. The model must be online unless you can't do it online. I'm certainly not suggesting that there won't be channels and there shouldn't be channels for all Ontarians. However, I think our model's been the wrong side of the pyramid. We now need to really understand that first and foremost, it needs to be designed for online service, whether it's through video, whether it's through the internet. We really have to think about delivery of services. We can see how important government services are in a time like this. For many of those who are vulnerable, for many of us whose life has been thrown upside down right now and require assistance and help, the lifeline is the government. There should be no excuse in terms of being able to deliver services. So despite the situation we're in, what an incredible opportunity. I hope we don't lose this opportunity, that we're able to work together as a community within government to make the right investments and to make the right strategic choices about the future of our workforce and the future of how we deliver services.
Excellent. Tammy, do you have a perspective? Just before you start, you're still on mute.
Okay. Somebody's trying to unmute me. Can you hear me now?
We can, yes.
Okay. Yeah. So when you try to unmute us for us, then it slows down our ability to do it. So yes, we as well are looking. I think this is a great opportunity as well. And what I would see is that 100% of our workforce will be able to work remotely, and also that our processes are going to change so we can enable that. I would like to be in the position that our colleagues in Ontario are in, where people can get their own devices. Somebody online talked about how are we accommodating people that need special accommodations at home? And that's been a big issue for us. Like, how do we, get them the equipment? So we've sort of struggled through this. Right now, what we're doing is we're either providing a delivery service, or they can pick it up at the office in a secure way. They're locked up in cleaned cabinets, and they're given access to the equipment, but that has been very problematic for us. So our processes have to really get away from having people on site, and we need to start being able to support people remotely. But I'm hopeful that this will change the views of remote work. Because I think in government, for the longest time, we have not seen it as a viable solution. And I think now they're seeing finally how much power we can put in people's hands when they're able to work from home. So I hope this is here to stay. And our goal is that in the coming weeks that we're going to be able to connect everybody so that we can continue to deliver very important services to Canadians.
What a great statement. Ralph, from your perspective, and maybe you can help unpack this a bit, not all organizations have the same size and breadth and, frankly, public service. There are those that may be in the not-for-profit or business and or smaller and medium-sized organizations that haven't had that same experience or preparation around continuity of service and teleworking. How do you think they are going to adjust in this period?
Well, that's a really good question, Elizabeth. I think when people, again, maybe the smaller to medium-sized organizations, they experience what's going on now. I think a lot of them will obviously do a lessons learned. I think it's difficult at this point if you're trying to stand up like that digital behavior, that digital environment for your workforce and really for your customers and your suppliers. It's not something that you can quickly react to. And so I think looking at all the services, everything that's out there, it's really to understand what are those capabilities that you need in order to operate effectively. And then how do you deploy them in a way that makes them really easy to use, and so you can deliver that experience regardless of whether it's to your customers or your employees. And for us, that means really, one of the things that I've been really focused on is being able to access things anywhere, anytime from any device. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of just a basic foundation I think that people have to think about. And I know that's been echoed by some of the other panelists. And it's really, if you kind of focus on those, again, that fairly simplistic motto, some of the other things then just kind of drop into place. And again, just reinforcing those digital behaviors.
Right. Excellent. Thank you. Daphne and perhaps Tammy, I'd be very interested in your perspective, speaking from your chairs, as to how this period, unusual, may also be helping us both in terms of outreach and understanding what Indigenous communities may need, and frankly may be able to be integrated in a more active way into teleworking as well.
Sure. Do you want me to start?
That'd be terrific. Thanks.
Well, I will admit I don't have the specifics of area by area, community by community, but what I can say is that we are absolutely thinking about the digital divide. I think, if anything, this situation has all, like the question that many were posing around, is access to internet and is access to mobile devices a luxury or a necessity? Mm-hmm. I've heard some people champion that it's actually a human right at this stage. And, I certainly feel like that's the direction we're heading in. I know for Ontario, as an example, ensuring that there is full broadband coverage, whether it's access to schools, or whether it's in our northern communities, has been a plan, and we've been slowly making our way to covering. As an example, every opportunity we have, whether it's through the justice system or the education system or through our social assistance offices, we're making connections to communities and enabling them to work online. So I do believe this is the opportunity, although I have to say, and perhaps my federal colleagues have more information, but I haven't seen I would say a policy statement around what this means for those populations.
Tammy?
So for us federally, I'm not directly involved, but I've been fortunate enough to have been able to go up north and to work there with the communities. And I know I have some colleagues that I'm working with on this that are on the call. What I can say is they do have devices and they do have some connectivity, but that connectivity is not very strong, and it depends where you are. And so our colleagues at Shared Services Canada are working really, really hard to improve the connectivity in the northern communities. The challenges are, of course, construction can only happen during certain times of the year, and this current pandemic is not going to help. I would suspect that my colleagues are not going to be traveling north at this point in time, given that I've seen that in Nunavut, we're still at 0. I hope we're still there. I check every day because those are communities that can least afford to get sick right now. But it is our top priority to make sure that they are connected.
Excellent, thank you. Lawrence, perhaps you can help in the next question from one of our colleagues. The question is around whether the pandemic will accelerate the adoption of cloud computing, and that issue that has been top of mind previously around security and residency of data in Canada. How do you think that this pandemic has affected those issues?
It's funny, I was just typing the response back on the Q&A, so that's a good time. I had to sort of withdraw back. So
you're fast.
I'm trying to make sure that our colleagues on the phone and get as much value as well. So thank you for the question. And the questions are coming in fast. In terms of the first piece of accelerating cloud computing, absolutely. For those who are from that zone, where my colleague Daphne talked about the province, kudos to my colleagues there having Office 365. That's obviously there. I see a lot more on off-premise. In the city, we had a strategy to essentially have 80% of the environment off-premise, whether that's software as a service, platform as a service, or infrastructure as a service. So I see this now. And what we're trying to do is actually plan for the recovery now. You know, we had a COVID-19 response, which is the way we had it, then in terms of the recovery. So in terms of the security, I think as that, it will be ongoing. It will be based on risk assessment. So still now looking at the risk assessment, but it will be very fast in terms of the ability to ensure that your risk assessment and some of your security postures are now incorporated as part of the overall development security ops, or known as DevSecOps in our industry. In terms of the residency, I don't have a feedback for that right now. I think that if we look at, the closest thing that we've seen in terms of digital government is probably Estonia, that from the ground up, from a greenfield, that really built that piece. So what some of us are doing in the city right now is trying to reimagine if we had no restrictions, what would a digital city look like, which includes actually the ability to have that digital wallet or that digital experience. So on a residency standpoint, I would just say we wait and see. But in terms of cloud computing, absolutely. I think that's moving at a rapid pace. Security, that's incorporated within development, security, and operations. So those environments that were more of the traditional waterfall model, I think this pandemic will remove that. It goes into DevSecOps.
Right, excellent, thank you. And a question then that is also coming from the online chat around, and maybe Daphne, you want to respond to this. I note you were typing as well. Clarification on the data aspect of BCP. What are we tracking and how are we able to monitor compliance and potential breaches?
Sorry, on business continuity planning?
That's right.
So, sorry, I'm going to switch it a little bit, if you don't mind, to just the question that I saw there was really, are the BCPs, the way that they've been developed in government, are they a one-size-fits-all, and what are we going to learn from the experience that we have? And you know, I think what's shocking about our business continuity plans is that they never really considered the scenario that we're in. I think the whole method of doing tabletop exercises, having the agility to think about different scenarios like the one we're experiencing now has probably been missed, to be frank. I think BCP is way too close to kind of emergency management and very, very localized issues. And we've got to think completely differently about business continuity. As I've said, business continuity should be about continuing to deliver services and using technology in order to do that, and making sure your workforce and your online services can continue to function, you know, globally, not just locally, based on perhaps a disaster scenario.
Right. Ralph, are there some takeaways for you on the BCP side from this experience? Yes, excuse me, business continuity.
Yeah. I think business continuity planning really needs to be a combination. I think this has been referenced before by the other panelists. It needs to be a combination of the technology capabilities and the technology that's used to support the business as well as the business. And it's really the those two together, and it's not that they're separate, but we need to look at that as an integrated whole. I know that we've got a business continuity committee that actually started to meet in the February timeframe as they started to see, and again, we've got a lot of medical doctors, sorry. And so they kind of saw this coming, and it's not that anybody could have anticipated the speed and the escalation of how quickly this has come about, but we started standing up a group of people, which was largely the business, and then we really tried to understand, okay, how do we as an IT group fit into that? And let's make sure, again, that we can maintain the connectivity, that we can maintain those applications, and really just stay connected and ensure that we're looking at the business as an integrated whole, as opposed to a number of different parts.
Very interesting, thank you. And a top of mind question that has come forward: how do you think this crisis has changed the role of a CIO? Maybe Tammy, you could start us on that perspective.
Oh my goodness, how has it changed? I think that, well, my focus is definitely different than it was before from a technology, and it's expediting the need. I think it's also changed in the last 2 weeks. I believe that they have now seen the importance of the work we do. Maybe an example, you know, this crisis that we're in and trying to get people recovered on their connectivity, we have to call them. It is shocking how little people really know about IT and about their laptop. Okay, absolutely shocking. And so I've actually sat down last night and thought, this crisis has actually become a gift. And a gift because it has allowed my technical folks to connect with the business. And the business is now seeing how important their work is, and it's enabling a conversation that wasn't there before. And so I'm going to try and use this opportunity to teach the workforce. And I think what will come out of here is hopefully a better relationship between business and IT that will help us on the digital front, because we need to work closer together going forward to turn our business digital. So I'm hoping that this will be a gift and an opportunity for us to create that capability to remotely enable everyone from wherever they are, whether it's up north or here in Ottawa in their homes.
Excellent, thank you. Ralph, from your chair, how has this situation changed the view of how CEO in your organization and partner organizations is seen?
Well, I think I've been a proponent of becoming a digital business and digital behavior for quite a few years, and that's really something I've been pushing fairly hard. And I think people are starting to, and I think this is kind of a juncture which people really understand, well, what does that mean? And how do we actually become more digitally enabled. And I think part of it is connectivity, but the other part of it is really in our business processes. So how do we approve things? How do we sign for things? And again, we're still in that area very much paper-based. And so it's about changing those behaviors and working through this notion of digital signatures. I think the other thing, and again, from my perspective, it's been about less on the technical side, more on the behavioral side of things. So one of the things about helping people to connect and modeling that behavior. So we've actually now instituted a weekly call with my entire division, which is it's a little over 200 people, and roughly 140 to 150 people connect. And we just spend a half an hour on the phone. I want to know how they're feeling. We kind of broadcast how we're doing overall within the business. And then it's about trying to inculcate those digital behaviors in the rest of the business. So being able to keep your files online. We use Office 365 and we're actually doing fairly well. But I think, again, people are seeing an opportunity to improve our behaviors with this. And it's, again, how do we lead them to really where they can operate, again, from this notion of anywhere, anytime, any device.
Right. Huge. Absolutely. Lawrence, from your chair.
I think I'll just add on, it's made us business leaders. I'm now in conversations that are actually about the strategic look of the future. So it's not a technical conversation, it's actually about a business conversation. And I think it's brought us to the most senior levels where those decisions now cannot be made without us. I think there was a viewpoint that we were there before, but it becomes a critical essence of our involvement. So I think that's one part. The next part is that it's become a cultural conversation. And I know I've spoken on that, where there are conversations where I'm now saying, this is not a technology issue. This is actually about behavior. This is about how we actually look at the adoption in terms of the ability to actually change minds. So I think that it's rounding us up in terms of our roles, because I had some feedback where, you know, some of my colleagues, the first thing they thought that the environment was going to, quite frankly, crash. And when we went through sort of 2 weeks and I explained to them some of the methodology I had based on 4 S's, you know, stability, scale, solutions, and sustainability, and how we had a very strong approach, it really started to become very, very interesting, because some of the self-isolation that's had to occur for some people, it's been our team. So I think that it's made us business leaders, which is what we've always hoped for. And it means that all the decisions I think going forward, we have a very important seat on the table to shape the organization as well as to shape our
Daphne,
communities.
last word to you on your perspective.
Yeah, maybe I'll also answer one of the questions that just came up. It's related.
Thank you.
You know, I mean, Lawrence said it incredibly well. I've always felt as a CIO, we are business leaders. We're not always treated that way, but I feel that way. This has certainly solidified that. Maybe the other point is a terrific amount of appreciation, and I think that's well overdue for particularly our infrastructure teams who, you know, work 24/7 to scale, to ensure that there's access to, in fact, stand up contact centers and modes of electronic communication for new 1-800 numbers that, you know, we're all standing up to make sure that we can connect with the public quickly. So there's a huge amount of appreciation that's changed a lot of the role and the way that we're the way we have discussions at the table. I would say that the other part of it is that we are role models for productivity, for collaboration, and we're now the first place to come with respect to solution development. You know, I think I've always felt we are and should be, but the speed at which people require, the speed at which we need to do problem solving and solution development is unheard of, and we've risen to the challenge, and I think that's given our business partners a huge amount of confidence. And then lastly, I'll say we are getting to a place where we need to automate a lot more of the interaction with the public with respect to some of the more frequently asked questions to one of the questions on the chat through digital messaging and chat bots, and we certainly do have that in place, and we'll do more of that in the coming days and weeks.
Excellent. Well, I know we're out of time, but I just wanted to thank all of you. Very insightful, very honest conversation. And again, you're part of the hero group for this health and economic crisis we're all weathering. Thank you.